Over the last 2 years, Steve Bannon has placed himself at the very center of promulgating the big lie, trying to make sure that we have as many right-wing candidates running on the big lie and that as many people as possible get ready to perhaps do what they failed in doing in 2020. Now, as we are live, the midterms are not fully decided. We don't know exactly how some of these races are gonna go, but I thought it was a good time to check in on Steve Bannon, how he's processing all this, and what he has done over the past few years in regards to the big lie. So we're very lucky to be joined live on the show by the Media Matters Deputy Director of Rapid Response, Madeline Peltz. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very glad to have you here, thank you for that. I did read though, that you have been listening to Steve Bannon's War Room podcast for more than 2 years. So I'm sorry that you've had to go through that. So what has that research over 2 years done to prepare you for the role that Steve Bannon and his movement wants to play in these midterms?
Well, it's been really a fascinating trajectory. As you know, Steve Bannon's strategy for exerting political influence is really to throw spaghetti at the wall. And we've seen him take on a number of different causes and organizing actions over the years, going back to when the show launched in December of 2019. But especially the pivot has been very electoral focused after the disaster that was January 6th. Almost immediately after January 6th, Steve Bannon started hosting a local unknown GOP activist named Dan Schultz to promote a project called the Precinct Committee Strategy. And what that strategy is inserting conspiracy theorists and extremists into the lowest levels of the Republican Party politics. And these positions have a number of different roles. Some are election related, some are party related. But ultimately, what they do is they infect the party infrastructure with extremists who are listening to the War Room on a regular basis and regurgitating these conspiracy theories into official structures. And my concern leading into the midterms was what effect is this project and other efforts to insert instability and chaos into the electoral process, what effect will that organizing effort over the last 2 years have? And what we've seen over the last few days, and of course much remains to be seen, is a very bad night for the Steve Bannon project, for his agenda. Many of his preferred candidates lost and lost spectacularly. And we haven't been in the last few days seeing a big follow-up call to action like we did in the immediate aftermath of the 2020 loss. So
why do you? I've sort of noticed that as well. I mean, look, I'm not watching Steve Bannon's War Room and I'm not on 4chan. So these conspiracy theories have to rise up a bit before they would be on my radar. But why do you think it is that the lying about the election results, trying to get them overturned, why does that seem to be a lower priority or at a lower level?
I think they're just stunned. I think that no one was expecting these results. I think the mainstream media very much pushed a framework based on flawed polling that suggested that these candidates had a much better chance than they actually did. And I think that they haven't been able to do much besides cope in real time. And so over the next few weeks and months will be a critical period, especially depending what happens in Nevada and Arizona, exactly how election deniers and violent extremists will recuperate and attempt to impose their agenda by any means necessary. So those two states are critical.
Look, it definitely seems like I was worried that they would claim that the elections had been rigged even when I thought that they were going to win. I thought they would win and then claim we should have won bigger. That the fact that they didn't get the red wave they want would seem to play into their victim complex. And so I'm wondering, do you expect that they're gonna bounce back? Is this movement gonna be able to sustain from now until the presidential election? Or do you think that inevitably Steve Bannon will move on to some other grift, some other focus? Maybe he'll start demonizing the trans community more or something like that. Where do you think that movement goes from here?
Well, Bannon is someone with an uncanny ability to recognize opportunities. That's been seen throughout his eclectic career in many different fields. And I think it is a mistake to always count him out, to ever count him out. That said, the Republican Party under potential leader DeSantis is not one in which Bannon has the same level of control as he would if Trump were to retain his grip on the Republican Party. And his wing of this movement is really going to be harmed by any potential infighting between DeSantis and Trump, which has clearly already started. So I think that it remains to be seen exactly what role Steve Bannon plays in the future of the Republican Party. His losses on election night were stunning. The Republican Party at the national level took a very hands-off approach in the primary process. And as a result, they got a lot of bad candidates because people like Steve Bannon and far-right billionaires were able to hijack the process. So he's down, but perhaps he's never out.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question just because you have been following him. And I've seen a lot of right wingers weigh in on the conflict you're talking about there. Most seeming to question Trump in a way that they haven't seemed to feel comfortable up until recently. A few like Carrie Lake and Marjorie Greene continuing to support Trump. You've laid out a good reason why the incentive would be for Steve Bannon to support Trump, to deny that they need to move on. Have you seen any of that in his coverage yet?
In terms of backing away from Trump?
Or attacking DeSantis and claiming that the party should still be a Trump party. Has he taken a clear position?
Well, no, he opened his show after an extremely despondent election night, which carried over into the early morning hours. On Wednesday morning, he was saying that the audience shouldn't watch if they're here for the drama, and in his flamboyant way, disavowing and distancing himself from the infighting that's happening, which is initiated by his political, Donald Trump, who holds the reins of Steve Bannon's political future. And so it's something that he clearly recognizes is only to his own detriment, and he's doing his best to avoid it as much as possible. He won't be able to make the same inroads with Ron DeSantis as he did with Donald Trump, because Steve Bannon really took advantage of Donald Trump's weaknesses to leverage himself into power, and Ron DeSantis doesn't have many of those same qualities and character flaws.
Okay, well, that's one point in the column for Ron DeSantis, being able to see through Steve Bannon and reject him. In any event, Madeline, we appreciate your work and joining us, exposing yourself to the undiluted, unfiltered thoughts of Steve Bannon for a couple of years. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.